I'm sure, Sharen, many people in the room already know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Can you just tell me a little bit about the size and scale of McCabe's as it is at present and how you've grown in recent years?
Well, it's been a family business, and we are just over 40 years. It's not an overnight success. It's 40 years getting to where we're at. So we've grown pretty steadily, but slowly over the years. We turn over about mid 60 million, 64, 65 million. And that is a combination.
So you're doing better margins than the poor wholesalers, are you?
A different way of looking at it, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But really, our mix is very much about dispensary and healthcare retailing. Sometimes people, I suppose, look at McCabe's and think we're very much about the shopping centre locations. We've high-profile shopping centre locations, but they're actually quite a small part of the overall estate. So we've 28 stores, of which 5 or 6 really are in those key locations. The rest are community pharmacies. So most of our mix is really about healthcare, dispensing and over-the-counter.
But are those very different types of retail outlets to run? If you're in a shopping centre and you have a big square footage, do you run those businesses in a different way to the smaller community pharmacies?
You do, and you do have to, we do find that a lot of our support office resource is tailored to the unique environment you have of a shopping centre, and managing centre managers like the Dundrum Town Centres of the world and some of these big institutional property players. It does have a different type of skill set, but a lot of the principles of what we want to do in our business run right across all of the stores.
But for those shopping centres, for example, do you have regular customers who come for their medicines, or is it regular customers who come for the over-the-counter products and the healthcare products rather than medicine delivery?
So it's interesting. You have a mix. So certainly the shopping centres would have a more transactional and transitory type of customer and patient. But you'd be surprised how many regulars are in Dundrum or are in the pavilions. Generally, our business links very closely with grocery, so you'll notice that all of those shopping centre locations are right beside a grocer, and people do their weekly shopping. We would have seen it during the pandemic, where we might have been the only place open in a major shopping centre, and you know, the regular, you know, and the loyalty of our prescription base was like it's quite extraordinary. So people still wanted to come and see the team that they'd always dealt with, even in a big environment like that. So there's so many principles about healthcare and the importance of the connection with your pharmacist and the team around them that kind of holds through all types, whether you're a small rural, a commuter belt community store, or you know, a town centre destination.
How important is it to you that you have remained independent?
It's important. Look, I'd say personally, I love this sector and I love this profession, and I think in a world where, you know, people are talking about purpose and meaning, you know, about, you know, what you do, we're actually very lucky that we innately day to day get to, you know, make life better in a little way for, you know, in everyday situations. And so having your independence to go about doing that and putting your shine on how you want to serve the patient and serve the customer actually is very fulfilling. And if you don't have that autonomy and independence to do it, I think it restricts the feeling you have for the profession. So that sort of importance of, you know, it was touched on earlier, there is a unique relationship in Ireland between the pharmacist and their patient, and for us, our independence as being an Irish group allows us to hold on to that, and it does make it very enjoyable.
Well, this isn't necessarily applicable to mergers and acquisitions, although when we talked about vertical integration, how's your relationship with the two lads here at the front? And how do they look after you, given that they have their own businesses to service as well in the retail sphere? I'm
going to have to be fair on the mind, because they're like in close physical proximity. Look, it's challenging. It's challenging, and you know, we talked about empathy, so we're gonna you know, use deep amounts of empathy here. There's absolute recognition that, the points that both Uniphar and United Drug have made about the way their system is set up and how they're essentially a price taker. We do understand that. We will always bat for what we need for our patients, and that is we need regular, we need timely, efficient deliveries that come into our stores, because actually one of the big challenges we're going to have, and I'm sure we'll touch on it during the morning, is the efficiencies needed in retail community pharmacies. We need to do a lot of the lean work that, to be fair to the wholesalers, they've done already. And if we need to do that, then that lean cycle of deliveries, that ability to respond quickly to our patients is going to become more and more important. Do they look after us? I genuinely believe that, certainly my wholesaler does their best. Am I annoyed by, some of their, practices in recent times? Absolutely. Am I, infuriated by the stockouts that do affect patients and that make life for, the efficiencies of our dispensaries more difficult? Absolutely. It has been infuriating. But I think the whole world does understand that the pandemic led to a massive supply chain disruption. And to be fair to pharma and wholesaling, they haven't escaped it.
Okay, we're going to talk more about mergers and acquisitions, and I'll bring you in a moment on that, Stuart. But tell us about your own recent acquisitions. How many have you made, even during COVID times and since?
So we found during the pandemic it was quiet. People probably had their head down trying to manage the onslaught of what had happened to us all. Most of us went through a major, we were turned on our head in terms of the complexity of what we had to deal with very fast. And there's nobody that didn't rise to the occasion in Irish pharmacy. So I think most people weren't actually in the mode of selling or thinking about selling. They just wanted to get through it. I do think as we've come through it, a lot of people are taking stock. They see that the structure of community pharmacy and how it used to run and how it is going to run in the future, change is inevitable. And I do think that people will decide, I'll either be part of that change and I'm going to go, hell for leather, or what, I've kind of it's time to move on or to exit. So we've bought 2 community pharmacies in recent months. They're in the Leinster area, and they'd be what I'd call good quality dispensing businesses. They weren't huge, big retail offerings, but they were, businesses where we believed that the quality of the dispensing in there was super, run by excellent owner managers, and that has.
Sorry, do you get a commitment from them to stay for a period of time?
It depends. You'll have people who really do want to exit immediately.
It's their retirement, is it?
It's their retirement, or they feel they've other things they want to do. But equally, for every acquisition where we have bought a pharmacy where the vendor wants to exit immediately, we also have people that 20 years on are still dispensing with us, and those type of relationships, we cherish. And I'd say, we've as many that continue to work with us that as those that exit on day one.
Okay, talk me through a little bit what sort of issues come up during the transactions and also the value that you're looking for. And actually, in the first case, how big do you want to get? I mean, what are your ambitions? You have, 28 stores at present?
28 stores.
How many do you want?
So, how many do we want? I mean, you look at the market, I suppose we would see that, there's just under 2,000 outlets registered in the market. I mean, if, in terms of meaningful market share, I suppose you need to get into the 100 type area. It's taken us 40 years to get to this point, but we do believe we can accelerate that. And to that extent, I suppose we have recently appointed a Director of Acquisitions, Ciara McCormack, who's here in the audience today. And with Conor MacDonald, our Finance Director, is also here. We just believe our moment now is to accelerate that. And so, yes, we want to grow sustainably, but we do want to get to more scale because we have put so much investment in our support office platform, and that's a key thing about how we're going to drive efficiency and profitability into the future. If we can't grow, that investment becomes very challenging.
Okay, so it's to justify almost the investment in
Partly.
back office and everything
Partly.
like that, partly. Okay, so then what sort of multiples are you looking to purchase on? Are you looking to buy premises, or is it just literally the leasehold?
Yeah. So I think multiples go off, an assumed profitability. And you have to say, for us, it's the quality of the earnings in that EBITDA. So we look for good, repeatable quality of earnings. So the one-off bits of your business, really you need, the more that you can demonstrate that that's repeatable business, the more we can value it. I think things that will drive a multiple higher, I think is generally accepted that there's multiples going between, 5 and 6, and things that drive it higher are, clearly the location, clearly the security of the team is a happy, well-functioning team. Aspects around location are important, and is there growth? So
what about the size as well of a particular venue?
So the physical size, it can be important, particularly if there's going to be accelerated growth and you can't contain it. But I wouldn't put it as it's not a barrier to a good valuation. And I think the more you can demonstrate repeatable earnings, a really great team, and demonstrate where the growth can come from, that will push your multiple much higher.
I would agree.
Stuart, is there a sense that there are many sellers out there at present, that there might be, amongst the 2,000 locations around the country, that there are a lot of owners who are getting older and who are looking perhaps to sell the business and not creating opportunity for buyers?
So the short answer is yes. The market has been very active the last couple of years. 39 transactions in 21, 24 so far this year. The Macaulay's deal not in that because still subject to CCPC approval, and our pipeline for the next 6 months, as I was saying to you earlier, is very, very busy. So there is a lot of stock coming to the market. Quality of stock has been very good. So yes, but the age profile piece you mentioned is interesting, because it's not just people at classical retirement age now that are selling out. Pharmacists are jaded, right? I mean, the COVID period has pharmacists jaded. The current labour issues have pharmacists jaded. And we're seeing owner-operators come to the market now where we would feel that they're maybe 10 years earlier than you would expect them to come to the market. So you have that blend, you have that classical kind of early 60s, mid-60s profile who's selling out, but you have people in their early 50s as well. And I think it's just a function of everything we're hearing today, how much pressure now is on the labour market and the impact that has on the owner-operator.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit more about this labour market issue, because, anecdotally, there are suggestions that a lot of pharmacies are finding it very hard to find cover for themselves, a bit like with GPs all over the country as well, are complaining at the moment that they just literally are being overworked because they can't find people to do so. Is that provoking some people to say, I've had enough of it, I'll just sell and let somebody else take on that problem?
Oh, for sure. For sure. It's the number one issue. So in 2021, the number one issue is COVID burnout. The reason that people are coming to the market in 2022, it's all about labour. I'm working 60 hours a week. I'm behind the counter myself. There's more to life than this. I want to get out. So it absolutely is that. The local market is unsustainable in my view. The way in which the local market is set up is just not sustainable from an operator perspective. I'd love to hear what Sharon's view on it is now, because she'll have a much more intelligent view than me. But the way in which pharmacists, the availability of pharmacists in the market is a big issue, and it is driving activity. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, given if you're buying places, do you not fear that you won't actually have the staff for them in the future?
Like it's definitely one of the biggest things to take into account when you're acquiring, and that's why I made the reference to, if you've got a secure, happy team, you can definitely drive up the value of your business. And one of the things we've been looking at and getting really good reaction to is quite often there's people who want to exit because maybe they feel they're pre-retirement, but actually they're spent after the last 2 years. And there's this concept where you can bank a value for your business today, but actually stay on in the business and do what you love to do, which is actually be a patient-focused frontline pharmacist without the sort of the business and administrative burden, and actually bank a future stream of income with us. And that has got a lot of attention. So it's like, releasing a little bit of equity now, but know that you still have growth and you're still not done in the sector. I think that the labour shortage, the pharmacist shortage, we can talk about, the locum situation, but actually for me what's far more critical is that we make community pharmacy really attractive for people. And those of us that are in, any sort of associations or within the IPU, with our regulator and amongst ourselves, we have to talk about what are the issues that are driving people out of community pharmacy, and we have to obsess about making it really attractive. So there's no point me whining about, rising costs, etc., if I'm not willing to actually put the pharmacists at the core of what we're doing and make it a really attractive role for them.
But could it be that you're also going to benefit from, and I've noticed this where I live in Dublin and Rathmines, that a number of pharmacies have shut, that you actually are going to benefit from a consolidation, that the bigger chains and even smaller chains like yourself will benefit from being able to be there while small independent individual retailers shut down?
I think ironically the places that can't open probably have more of a talent challenge than independents do. So I wouldn't necessarily agree with that hypothesis. I think there's other reasons for consolidation, but actually, well-run groups, well-run independents actually will always put their people at the heart of what they do. And I just think the whole conversation is a call out for all of us to make our places just really compelling. But I don't think it'll happen at the expense of independence. In fact, I think the plethora of symbol groups, franchises and supports actually will ensure that an independent sector is going to thrive. But you do need the support of some of that infrastructure to do it.
I want to throw it out to the audience. Does anyone want to make any comments or ask any questions in relation to the labour issues at this stage? You're all happy with the labour issues?
Anyone got the answer?
Okay, well, if there's nobody there, I will press on. So in relation, of course, the other issue as well at the moment for pharmacies, the other costs, property costs and energy bills, those things. How are you going to deal with it? We've been hearing from the lads how it's impacting on the wholesalers.
Certainly, pharmacists' salary costs are the most concerning piece. Other overheads, we're no different to any other business sector anywhere. It's all going one way, and that's significantly up and very fast. And in some respects, there's not an awful lot we can do about it. In pharmacy specifically, though, I do think there is an opportunity to use this inflationary time to start driving lean process efficiencies, working practices. We have no option, and probably the stuff that the wholesalers, to be fair, did years ahead of us. That's work that we need to work with our regulator, with our reimbursement, with the PCRS in terms of the administrative burdens, how many times we touch paperwork, our workflow setup. Those sort of lean processes have to really be driven in to offset some of the changes that we're seeing on the cost side. I don't actually have any other answer but that type of approach.
And what about pricing? Will you increase prices?
Very, very difficult. Clearly we're going to be price acceptors from suppliers. There's a raft of price increases that are drifting through all supply chains. OTC, anything in the cosmetics, etc. Significant price increases, and they're still coming at us. Very difficult for us to put up our retail prices and still expect people to come in and spend with us. So that's a very delicate thing. So for me, the challenge is to work further down the line, which is it's got to be around the cost rather than punishing the consumer, customer, patient in all of this.
Matt, just to come in on that point for a moment, if you think of it, 60% of the revenue comes from the state, so Sharen actually has no ability to negotiate that price directly with the state. And what you've seen is that what the state has paid pharmacists over the last 10 plus years has been flat in terms of the fee, the dispensing fee, while costs have been going up. So I think there's a very real argument now that the dispensing fee that the state pays to the pharmacists should be increased. I know the Irish Pharmacy Union is one of their platform policies, right? Mm-hmm. An increase in the fee to €6.50, which and we actually did the economic analysis to support that Fitzgerald pair, and I think it's intuitive and it's sensible and it's equitable, because if you look at the cost inflation, particularly in labour, the cost of dispensing one item, one medicine item has ballooned over the last couple of years, and the state can't be the only payer in the market that's not subject to price inflation. It doesn't make any sense, you know. So to for an operator like Sharen, yes, potentially they could look at the retail, they could look at the private RX, but really the state probably has to pay more if they want to continue the service. And to your point about pharmacy closures, I mean, that is cause and effect, right? You know, the unviability of these pharmacies is going to lead to patient safety issues, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I asked you earlier about the size of stores as well when you're looking to acquire is maybe a perception has developed that for a lot of people what they look for now in a pharmacist is more than just the dispensing of the medicines. It's all of the other healthcare services and products and range of products, and that you need scale to actually do that.
Yeah. So I suppose answering your question literally, you know, do we preclude someone who's got a very small premises? No, because we'll always look for opportunities to possibly relocate nearby into something bigger. But you're absolutely right. Our business model is really, you know, predicated on driving dispensary volumes, and you know, we're working very closely with robotics and efficient processes and that. You know, that assists with space, but actually it's a commitment into services is where we want our model to be. So it is about the professional practice of pharmacy. That needs consultation rooms. It also needs, you know, healthcare services rooms. So, you know, if you walk into our Dundrum Town Centre store, we have 3 very large consultation rooms. We've got 4 in our City West store. That's the future for us. So we do want to be able to provide those in a, you know, not a shoehorn sort of experience.
Well,
for the patient.
particularly if your campaigns to have more services actually work out. If pharmacists can take some of the pressure off GPs, you're going to need more space on premises to do that.
Yeah, and I think many of us are sort of going ahead of the curve. We haven't yet got properly remunerated for it. We've gone ahead and invested and believed in the future of pharmacy services. We've been at this a long time, long before COVID vaccinations. And it's been very hard to justify dedicating all this space to these kind of services. But I suppose I personally believe the future has to be in that. And I think the vaccination programme of the last 2 years has been our first meaningful way to start delivering services where we get remunerated adequately, you know, for what we do. But you do need space, and it has to be professional. We can't no longer expect, you know, patients to squeeze into, you know, a closet under the stairs.
And look at the impact. I mean, look at the impact from that COVID vaccination service. It was colossal. And look at the impact on patients, you know. And there's been so much talk, hasn't there, over the last 10 years from a Department of Health perspective about pushing more services into the pharmacy and the state paying for them. And very little has actually really happened.
Very little.
You know, when it came to a point that it was required from a public health perspective with COVID, it was turned on overnight and the impact was colossal. So it just goes to show, I think, in microcosm what is possible.
And also, I think what pharmacy as a community demonstrated to the HSE was that, look, you know, we are a motivated but agile, extremely agile profession within primary healthcare, probably the most agile. And within 24 hours, people had set up vaccination clinics with minimal capex, no capex, but we did it safely and professionally, and we did it in a well-presented way. But we all know that's not sustainable. You need to invest in premises to do it well. Some of us have done it ahead of the curve and often wondered, will we ever see a return on it? I personally believe it's the future, and therefore we will continue to, you know, open up, you know, stores that have 3 and 4 consultation rooms.
So businesses always have challenges in front of them and uncertainties in front of them. Maybe there's a bit more at present, particularly with inflation the way it is, interest rates rising, making perhaps capital a little bit, financing a little bit harder to obtain, and maybe making people a little bit more uncertain about making acquisitions. So what are you seeing for the first 6 months of next year in relation to acquisitions in this sector by comparison with others?
Lots of activity. I think pipeline of vendors very strong. We've never had more activity on the sales side. I think when you look at a group like McCabe's, I mean, it's really instructive that Sharen is bringing in the head of acquisitions. It shows a certain appetite for the market. And I think if you look at the organised buyers at the top of the market, the Unifars, the United Drugs, Boots, who've been active over the last couple of years, I do expect to see continued activity. I still think that we talked about price equilibrium earlier on, and I still think at 5 to 6x, there's still a good return for those organised buyers. So we're seeing a lot of transaction activity. I think if you look at the just below, the chains just below Sharen, so Adrian Dunn's, McCartan's, I would expect to see those McGreals, I would expect to see those outfits active in the market next year.
And sorry, are buyers able to access the finance, or is the financial calculations changing for them as interest rates continue to rise?
So it's a really interesting point, and like when interest rates rise, it has an impact on future cash flow and has an impact on yield. So does that have to have an impact on valuation? Intuitively it would. Can they access funds? They can, but I mean we're basically in a two-horse banking system. We're in a two-horse wholesaler system, but we're also in a two-horse banking system. KBC exiting the market isn't good for the market from a pharmacy perspective, because they were very, very active. They got a lot of deals done, particularly at the lower end of the market for independents, and independents trade a lot. So Sharen did 2 deals in the last year, right?
Yeah, a couple of months ago.
But there's lots of single unit trading as well, where single store operators are scaling up and buying another pharmacy. So having KBC exit the market isn't good. Bank of Ireland, AIB, really, really supportive the sector and continuing to back operators. But still, you need competition in the market, and you would hope that someone like Permanent TSB can come in and actually take the place of KBC, because it isn't good for the market if they don't. But can they access, to answer your question, can consolidators access funding? They can. There's a lot of dry powder in the market. I mean, there's a lot of liquidity, not just in pharmacy, across the board. And I think for that reason, that dry powder has to chase return at the end of the day. And I think you'll see that reflected in activity. If not in valuation, certainly in activity.
Now, Sharen, I hope I haven't picked you up wrong, but I think you're looking to buy about 70 pharmacies by the sounds of it to get up over.
Give me a shout.
Hopefully it doesn't take 70 years.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. At what pace do you intend doing it? And, there's a lot of cost involved in doing single acquisitions as well.
Yeah.
So are you looking perhaps to try and buy in groups?
Yeah, we absolutely are looking to buy groups, and we would have been a last round underbidder in a very well-known process that happened in the last couple of months. So obviously didn't go our way, but we went all the way with it, and with clear funding for it. And I think that's a really important point about the funding, the relationship, particularly for people that are looking to sell their business. Be sure you know that the people that you're dealing with or who want to buy your business have cleared and approved funds, to do it, and that process takes a while, and we've done that. The ambition is to grow the business, and certainly start doubling, and obviously, get to the 100. But if you could buy a group or 2 or 3 groups, that's certainly where we want to put our head. That's where we put our effort with. We work with Bank of Ireland, and we've had tremendous support from them, and I think they've had good appetite for the sector. The ones and twos in terms of time, we've got used to it, and so we have I don't want to say a format, but we do have a template that works well, and we can work well with vendors that want to exit quickly, and we can make things happen. Like one of the transactions during the summer happened within 10 weeks from start to finish, so we can be very efficient and move very quickly with those types of.
Which is very efficient, by the way.
It is. It
is very efficient.
Do you find it better though to buy something that's existing rather than to set up something fresh for yourself? 2
very different approaches. It's certainly from a banking and finance point of view, the finance director always wants to see you buy existing cash flow. Greenfield sites are hard, and they seem straightforward in that you're not outlaying big sums of money, but pharmacy, it's not like opening a convenience store. Often these.
Why not?
The ability to ramp up the prescription business over time and to attract in new patients that will become repeatable visitors often can take a decade. You know, and I mean, anyone here who's opened greenfields, I mean, all my runaway successes have taken 15 years to, you know, to get. And often people in other sectors are very surprised at that. We were just talking earlier, we revamped our store in City West. It's a very, very busy store. And people were complimenting us on the refurb. But I said, but I was 15 years waiting for all those houses to build and for the people to come and to repeat. So it's not, it takes a while. So the greenfields soak up a lot of cash. The acquisitions are much quicker to get your return. But I think a balance is good, and we will have one significant greenfield early next year in a large town centre environment. So we will continue to do a combination of both.
I would be relatively jaundiced when it comes to greenfields. I think and it's not to say that there isn't individual units that'll work, and I know that Sharen will make hers work, but when you look at it generally, when you look at the data, 50% of pharmacies that have closed over the last number of years have been greenfields, which have opened in the last 5 years. And I think the other factor, so you're so right, it's all about the patient relationship, but the other big barrier now at the moment is health mail. So where the prescription is being transferred digitally to the pharmacy, you know, that creates a friction point. So the patient has to actually go and request that the prescription is transmitted to a different pharmacy, and that's quite difficult to disrupt, right? So what you're finding is that it's more and more difficult now for greenfield units to justify the investment. Not to say that there aren't cases where it'll work, but it's not like it was 10, 15 years ago where it was much easier to make them work. I think it's fair to say.
Also a point, when it comes to selling, an awful lot of the time people who run businesses are good at the customer facing thing, but the actual business itself and all the legalities in relation to title and licenses and whatever, have you had issues in relation to finding that people maybe are not properly prepared to make a sale?
To be fair to pharmacists that run their own businesses, I think not only are they healthcare professionals, but they're innately good business people. That's generally, you know, I've found they're, you know, entrepreneurs at heart. I think that the biggest challenges we find is people possibly haven't prepped as well as they could have before they went into the sale process. And this isn't actually a plug for Stuart, but actually it's well worth listening to your financial advisor before you go into a sales process. There are little things that will make a transaction a year long or 10 weeks long. And they are actually quite simple, but if you don't get them right, they can just, you run around tearing your hair out. The things I mentioned earlier about demonstrating repeatable quality of earnings, it's really important to talk to your financial advisor about how do I demonstrate that? How do I demonstrate the security of my team? How do I demonstrate where the growth is going to come from? Those things are worth spending a bit of time if you want to push your valuation up. There's technical things where, you know, you get into the process and someone, you know, pulls out their lease and goes, I never got the planning permission sorted on that car parking unit, and that extension never got, you know, properly, passed when regulations.
Have you noticed all the wry smiles around the room with this?
And we think that we've got everything all sorted, but actually when you pull it out of the drawer, you go, jeepers, I forgot to do it. And they're things that often can take months to sort out, landlord's approvals, etc. So well worth spending time with your solicitor, you know, going through that checklist. The other thing is, I think one of the things that I've seen that slows up a transaction is whether your solicitor is really, really experienced at doing a commercial transaction or isn't. And again, it's not a plug for big firms. Big firms will be doing it all the time and they will have resources. Equally, there are small firms that do it all the time and are used to it. But often the guy or the girl that has done your family will mightn't be doing it all the time, and you will lose money in terms of, you know, the time.
I would totally agree. So like that is one of the biggest. Proper legal advice is one of the biggest barriers to getting a transaction done, and a vendor will tend to use a corporate finance house because they're concerned about the price. You know, so they come to the likes of us, and the finance end of it will generally be okay. But exactly what Sharen is saying. The legal prep work just often isn't there. The lease isn't fit for purpose. There aren't employee contracts, there aren't employee handbooks. So the amount of times that a vendor will engage with a local solicitor who doesn't do commercial work, and where that puts a year onto the transaction is insane, actually. you know. And it does, you know, you get what you pay for, I think.
We actually work with, you know, large firm, but we also work with a very small firm. So it's certainly not to be dismissive of small firms. In fact, our small firm that we work with does this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So it's about the muscle that people
There's
have.
lots of smaller commercial firms, you know, you don't have to go to the top tier of this, but they need to be commercial specialists. To your point, the local solicitor who did your mother's will and the conveyancing on your house may not have the capacity to do a transaction.
It's important that this is usually the most important financial asset a person
For
is
sure.
letting go of, and it's the most important payday in their life, and so therefore, you know, it does save money and make money to use good advice.
You mentioned you hired Ciara McCormack to look after M&A. How much time do you spend on looking for acquisitions and then integrating them while you also have a business to run?
Yeah. Well, I suppose that's the reason why I've started to work with Ciara. Ciara has tremendous experience in a parallel healthcare market in doing this. I suppose in the past I spent an awful lot of time with Conor MacDonald, our FD. We, you know, nearly half of our time was looking at this and in our car, driving areas, visiting stores. And to be honest, do I love it? It's a part of it I personally really enjoy. But if you want to do it at scale, which is, you know, back to our getting to the 100, you can't do this and run the day to day as well. You do have to dedicate resource to it, and that's what we've decided to do.
And can I ask, are you looking to build to scale so then you can sell for an enormous amount at a later date?
Yeah. Well, no, quite genuine. It's not with a view to sell. I actually think genuinely believe this is a wonderful sector to be in. I really enjoy it. And I think as long as we can do it and get a return where we can keep reinvesting in, you know, pharmacy practice, that's the stuff that I get, you know, a buzz out of. And I do think, to the points the wholesaler made, time is of the essence for people who do want to sell. So if you get to a point where you've got to a certain scale, I'm not sure there's necessarily going to be plenty of bigger buyers out there. So that's not my motivation. You know, we want to grow because we just enjoy the sector.
That's fair. Do we have any questions or comments from the audience, please? I know, I'll keep you here and I won't let you out for coffee for a while. Nessica. Sorry, Una.
Sharen, you mentioned before about staffing and
Sorry, could we just get a microphone to you, because I think it might be difficult for people down the back to hear you from the front. Thank you. Just get it to you. Thank you.
you mentioned earlier about staffing, and I'm just wondering, post-COVID, I know in our business we have changed our opening hours in some stores, you know, just to really be able to staff our stores efficiently and safely, and maybe not doing as long of hours. Is that your experience? And if so, do you think that will continue? Has that made a big impact in some of your stores, or do you think is that the way to go in terms of just re-looking at our opening hours?
I think it's a really interesting point that we've grappled with. So to the point where, you know, we have the 5 or 6 big sort of shopping centre destinations, it's not really an option. We have to be open, and we've built our offering on the availability of our hours. Is it expensive? Yes. Is it really awkward? Yes. Is it hard to man? It really is. It's complex and it's expensive. In the community pharmacy area, we definitely have looked at efficient opening hours. So maybe where, you know, we were tempted to do an 8 o'clock opening, we're now back at 7. You know, would we go back to 6? We're not quite at that point, because we do think, you know, at the end of the day, we will never compromise what the patient and the customer is looking for in terms of relevancy and, you know, ease of access. But we constantly we have to look at it. We have to, because getting people to work those types of shifts becomes more and more complicated. That extra hour can often mean you have a pharmacist or you don't.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And you said that there might be some secret sauce in terms of just keeping people happy and engaged. And, you know, is there anything that you're doing that you would mind sharing with us here?
I'll be keeping it to myself. You know?
But, you know, what are the key, that if you were to say the top 3 things that are mattering to your team that you're really looking at, what would they be?
So I think, you know, look, I think this is probably a topic for, you know, all of us, and I don't have the solution right now. But the one thing I do know, and we talk about it within our own team, is we cannot continue to complain about it. We have to work towards making ourselves a really fabulous place to work. And to be fair, your organisation has done that and is awarded for it. So the things that seem to matter. Do I walk into chaos? So does a pharmacist walk into a chaotic environment? That's a major red flag for people. So how can we make our work environments, enjoyable, calm, orderly? Sounds very, very basic, but we find that that's actually a massive turn-off in terms of the retention of people. So do I walk into a consistently well-ordered, organised place? Do I have a bit of autonomy to exercise my professional discretion? It's really important. Do I have the hours that I want that suit my life? And we all know that's the friction point for us all. I think pay is important to the extent to which we all have to, we all know that we're getting, screenshots or whatever. This is what someone else is paying, you need to match it. I just don't think that's always going to be a feature. It's not going to go away. So to the extent to which we can work on all the other factors that just make it, you're going to have to always pay well. You're going to have to pay a market value. We can't keep complaining about it, but we do have to ensure that the environment people come into is really enjoyable. But I'm all ears for everyone else's secret sauce.
Okay, does anyone else want to ask a question or make a comment? Okay, so if we come back in a year's time, how many stores will you have bought in the next year?
I think for us it's around taking the opportunities that come. So if there's single operators that want, that we think, we're all a good fit, we will go as quickly as we can. And we've got, I suppose, the financial resources cleared to do that. If a group or two comes along, we're ready and willing and able. So, can I put a number on it? No, but are we open and ready and equipped to integrate? Because most importantly is you can take these things and you've got to integrate them, and help them flourish. We're all systems go.
I don't know if anything's recession-proof, but is this a recession-resilient sector, do you reckon, Stuart?
Well, healthcare is defensive, right? And I mean, you see, I think WBA, CVS, Uniphar have done a transaction in mainland Europe recently. So is a recession-proof? I don't know about that, but it's probably more resilient, to use your word, than some other sectors.
It's a very resilient sector. So one of the things we would say is it doesn't, fly high with the boom times, but equally it doesn't trough. It tips along well, and so this is where it's incumbent on people that are running to make them more efficient during the leaner times. But it is a resilient sector. And
to your point there, you haven't seen a huge amount of inflation in pharmacy valuations over the last 10 years or so, and where other asset classes have. So I think to Sharon's point exactly, it's steady. Hasn't inflated dramatically. Is it going to fall off dramatically? Probably not either.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll leave it there. Stuart and Sharen, thank you very much.